The clatter of silver against bone china echoes through the mahogany-paneled dining car as the Orient Express glides across the Austrian countryside. Outside, snow-capped Alps frame picture windows like living paintings. Inside, a woman in a velvet evening gown raises a champagne flute toward a businessman in a custom suit. The year is 1928, and for the passengers aboard this rolling palace, the journey matters as much as the destination. This is the story of how luxury train travel, once the pinnacle of elegant transportation, nearly vanished from the modern world. Steam billows across a platform in London's Victoria Station. A porter in a pressed uniform loads a steamer trunk, emblazoned with hotel labels from Cairo to Constantinople, onto a gleaming blue carriage. Passengers boarding the train step from one world into another, from the gritty industrial realities of early 20th century Europe into a cocoon of opulence moving at 60 miles per hour. What happened to this world of white-gloved service and mahogany-paneled sleeping compartments? How did the most glamorous form of travel, one that inspired Agatha Christie mysteries and defined an era of elegance, nearly disappear completely? The answer lies in a complex tangle of technological advancement, changing consumer preferences, world wars, and financial collapse. In the dining car of the Blue Train speeding through South Africa in 1939, a wealthy diamond merchant sips brandy while discussing business with a plantation owner. In the kitchen, 12 chefs prepare a 7-course dinner featuring fresh lobster kept alive in special tanks. Every glass is crystal, every plate is porcelain, every piece of silverware is actual silver. The staff-to-passenger ratio is nearly 1-to-1. By 1980, this same route is served by a utilitarian diesel train with plastic trays and microwaved meals. The dining car is replaced by a snack counter. Most passengers carry their own food. The decline wasn't sudden. It wasn't inevitable, and according to some who witnessed it firsthand, there was something almost supernatural about the speed and totality with which such magnificence vanished from the rails. Some old conductors speak of the curse of progress that doomed luxury rail. Others blame financial mismanagement or the democratization of travel. A few, those who worked the legendary routes in their final days, speak in hushed tones about how these grand old trains seemed to know they were dying. The Orient Express made different sounds in those final years, recalls Victor Jennings, who served as a steward in the 1970s. The crystal would vibrate differently, almost like the train was crying. Silly, I know, but all of us felt it. Something was leaving the world that would never return. The history of luxury rail travel begins not with indulgence, but with necessity. When George Pullman introduced his revolutionary sleeping car to American railroads in 1865, he wasn't primarily concerned with luxury. He sought to solve a practical problem. Long-distance rail travel was unbearably uncomfortable. Passengers on overnight journeys arrived exhausted, sore, and covered in coal dust. Pullman's innovation was to reimagine the interior space of the railway carriage. He introduced beds that folded away during daytime, sophisticated ventilation systems, and most importantly, a level of service previously unknown on the rails. By 1867, Pullman was operating 40 cars. By 1875, that number had grown to 700. By 1893, the year of the Chicago World's Fair, the Pullman Palace Car Company operated 2,248 cars and employed 13,922 people, including 2,573 conductors and 3,195 porters. The economics were brilliant. Railways owned the tracks and locomotives, but Pullman owned the sleeping cars themselves. His company staffed them, maintained them, and collected the premium that passengers paid for comfortable overnight travel. In essence, he created a luxury hotel chain that happened to move. Patrick Norris was born in 1847 to Irish immigrants in Boston. At age 14, he began working as a water boy on the Boston and Albany Railroad. By 17, he was a brakeman, and by 25, he had risen to conductor. In 1875, at age 28, he joined the Pullman Company as one of their first conductors. The Pullman conductor was a different breed, Norris wrote in his 1912 memoir, 40 Years on the Rails. We weren't just collecting tickets, we were ambassadors of comfort. Mr. Pullman told us that every passenger should feel like nobility, whether they were a Boston banker or a salesman from Cincinnati. Norris described a typical journey from New York to Chicago in 1880. We departed Grand Central Depot at 6 p.m. precisely. My porters, all Negroes of exceptional character, had prepared the cars immaculately. The linens were starched and pressed. The brass fixtures gleamed. As passengers boarded, each was greeted by name if they were regulars, and with formal courtesy if they were new to us. By Washington, dinner was served. White-coated waiters moved between the tables with practiced grace. The menu featured 6 courses, beginning with Blue Point oysters and ending with French pastries. The china bore the Pullman insignia, as did the silver and crystal. After dinner, my porters would transform the car. The seats became beds, curtained for privacy. Each berth had a call button to summon service at any hour. Fresh water and towels were always available. By morning, as we approached Chicago, passengers were awakened with hot coffee and newspapers purchased along the route. This level of service wasn't cheap. In 1880, a Pullman ticket from New York to Chicago cost approximately $5, around $135 in today's money, on top of the regular first-class fare of $20, $540 today. For context, the average American worker earned about $1.50 per day in 1880. The American model of luxury rail soon spread to Europe, though with distinctive national characteristics. In 1883, the Belgian businessman Georges Nijmakers launched what would become the most famous train in history. The Orient Express, running from Paris to Constantinople, now Istanbul, the Orient Express connected Western Europe with the exotic East. Unlike Pullman's operation, which democratized comfort for the American middle class, the Orient Express catered exclusively to the elite. Kings, diplomats, wealthy industrialists, and famous artists populated its passenger list. A one-way ticket cost roughly the equivalent of a laborer's monthly salary. The Orient Express wasn't just a train. It was a diplomatic instrument. By connecting Paris, Vienna, Budapest, Bucharest, and Constantinople, it physically linked the major powers of Europe at a time of intense nationalist rivalry. Spies, diplomats, and royalty used the train as a moving meeting ground where alliances could be formed and secrets exchanged away from prying eyes. By 1900, luxury trains had developed distinct personalities. The Orient Express was cosmopolitan and slightly mysterious. The British Pullman was proper and traditional. The Blue Train in France was flashy and associated with the Riviera's gambling set. The Trans-Siberian Express was adventurous and exotic. Each created its own mythology. The Orient Express appeared in novels and films as a setting for intrigue and romance. The Blue Train became associated with the Jazz Age and the fashionable set traveling to Nice and Monte Carlo. The Trans-Siberian offered the ultimate in terrestrial adventure, crossing 7 time zones from Moscow to Vladivostok. By 1910, luxury train travel had reached its technological zenith. The cars featured electric lighting, steam heat, hot and cold running water, and telephone communication between compartments. The great railway hotels at terminal stations, London's Midland Grand, Paris's Gare de Lyon, and Moscow's Yaroslavsky, created a seamless experience of luxury from city center to city center. Then came the Great War. From 1914 to 1918, Europe's railways were commandeered for military purposes. Luxury carriages were converted to hospital trains or used to transport troops. The Orient Express suspended civilian service entirely. Pullman's American operations were nationalized by the U.S. government. When peace returned in 1919, the world of luxury rail had changed irrevocably. The old European aristocracy, the core clientele of luxury trains, had been decimated by war and revolution. The Russian Revolution had eliminated an entire class of wealthy travelers. The Austro-Hungarian Empire had collapsed, and with it, a unified railway system that had spanned Central Europe. Yet paradoxically, the 1920s would become the golden age of luxury rail travel. A new clientele emerged: wealthy industrialists, film stars, fashion designers, and a growing class of international tourists. For these new elites, the luxury train was both transportation and status symbol. The 1920s saw the introduction of the Golden Arrow between London and Paris, the Blue Train's new deluxe service to the French Riviera, and the relaunch of the Orient Express with even more luxurious accommodations. In 1926, the London, Midland, and Scottish Railway introduced the Royal Scot, featuring Art Deco interiors by leading designers. In America, the 1920s brought the 20th century limited to its peak of luxury. Running between New York and Chicago, this train was designed to cater to the business elite. Departing Grand Central Terminal at 6 p.m., it would arrive at Chicago's La Salle Street Station at 9 a.m. The next day perfectly timed for a full business day. Passengers boarding the 20th Century Limited walked along a red carpet, the original red carpet treatment. A staff of 100 served approximately 145 passengers. The observation car featured a barber shop, manicurist, secretary, and stock ticker. The train even had its own newspaper, published on board with the latest news received by telegraph. A one-way ticket in 1928 cost $82.90, about $1,360 in today's money, including the Pullman surcharge. For comparison, a factory worker in 1928 might earn $25 per week. The passenger list of the 20th Century Limited on any given day read like a who's who of American power. On October 15, 1928, the manifest included 3 bank presidents, the owner of a major department store chain, 2 Hollywood film producers, and a U.S. senator. Behind the scenes, an army of workers made this luxury possible. In the kitchens of the dining cars, chefs prepared gourmet meals in spaces smaller than most home kitchens, working with open flames on a moving train. The dining car of the 20th Century Limited typically served 100 dinners in 2 hours, with 4 seatings of 25 passengers each. The Pullman porters, almost exclusively black men until the 1960s, worked punishing hours for modest wages, relying heavily on tips. A typical porter worked 400 hours per month with minimal sleep. Despite these conditions, positions were highly coveted within the black community, as they offered stable employment, travel opportunities, and respectability at a time when professional options for black Americans were severely limited. Vincent Jackson began working as a Pullman porter in 1925 at the age of 22. In a 1974 oral history, he recalled, "We were on duty from the moment the first passenger boarded until 30 minutes after the last passenger left, often 20 hours straight. We made up berths, shined shoes, pressed clothes, fetched drinks, all while maintaining perfect composure." The company rulebook was 205 pages long. We had to memorize the names of every regular passenger and their preferences. The job was exhausting but dignified. I sent both my sons to college on a porter's salary, and I saw America from coast to coast at a time when most colored folks never left their hometown. The economic crash of 1929 and subsequent depression dealt the first significant blow to luxury rail travel. Passenger numbers plummeted as the wealthy cut back on travel expenditures. Railways responded by reducing service, combining routes, and deferring maintenance on equipment. Yet even during these lean years, certain luxury trains maintained their allure. The Orient Express continued to connect Europe's capitals, though with fewer passengers and less extravagant service. The Southern Pacific Sunset Limited still carried Hollywood stars between Los Angeles and New Orleans. World War II brought the second major disruption. Again, Europe's luxury trains were converted to military use or simply suspended operation. In occupied territories, the famous blue and gold wagons of the Orient Express were seized as trophies by Nazi officials. In the United States, wartime restrictions on civilian travel and the prioritization of troop movements led to packed trains operating at reduced speeds with minimal amenities. The glamour was gone, replaced by practicality and necessity. When peace returned in 1945, the world of luxury rail would never fully recover. Multiple factors converged to permanently alter the landscape of travel. First came the automobile. The post-war economic boom, particularly in America, put cars within reach of millions. President Eisenhower's Federal Highway Act of 1956 created 41,000 miles of interstate highways. Suddenly, the freedom of the open road competed directly with the fixed schedules of railways. Paul Thompson, who served as a dining car steward on the Santa Fe Super Chief from 1948 to 1971, observed the change firsthand. Each year, we'd see fewer passengers. Folks who used to take the train from Chicago to Los Angeles were now driving. It wasn't faster, but they liked the independence. They could stop when they wanted, go where they wanted. The romance of the rails was being replaced by the romance of the road. An even more formidable competitor emerged in the skies. Commercial aviation, which had been a luxury niche market before the war, expanded rapidly in the 1950s and 1960s. The introduction of jet aircraft in 1958 dramatically reduced travel times. A journey that took 20 hours by luxury train could be completed in 5 hours by jet. Airlines actively targeted the luxury market that had been the domain of premium rail service. First-class air travel offered many of the same amenities: fine dining, attentive service, comfortable seating, with the added benefit of speed. By 1965, more Americans were traveling long distances by air than by rail. Perhaps most significantly, the culture changed. The formality and ritualized service that had defined luxury rail travel fell out of step with post-war sensibilities. The new generation of travelers valued speed and efficiency over ceremony and tradition. The pace of business changed, explained Richard Hargrove, a Pullman Company executive from 1950 to 1968. In 1930, a businessman thought nothing of spending 2 nights on a train to conduct a meeting in Chicago or New York. By 1960, that same businessman wanted to fly out in the morning, have his meeting, and be home for dinner. The economics became untenable. Luxury trains required large crews and expensive maintenance. Their ornate interiors, wood paneling, crystal chandeliers, custom upholstery, needed constant attention. Meanwhile, passenger numbers continued to decline. In Europe, nationalization of railways after World War II meant that the profit motive that had driven luxury innovation was replaced by a public service mandate. State-owned railways prioritized affordable mass transportation over premium service. The Orient Express provides perhaps the most poignant example of this decline. In 1962, the through service from Paris to Istanbul was discontinued. The train was broken into segments, each operated by different national railways with varying levels of service. The mystique of crossing Europe in a single luxurious journey was lost. By 1971, the situation for private passenger rail in America had become so dire that the federal government stepped in, creating Amtrak to preserve essential service. The legendary named trains, the 20th Century Limited, the Super Chief, the Broadway Limited, were consolidated into a standardized system with uniform equipment and service. The last run of the 20th Century Limited took place on December 2, 1967. The train that had once been the symbol of American business prowess departed New York with just 42 passengers. Most of the dining car staff had already been laid off, and passengers were served prepackaged meals. The red carpet, once literally rolled out for departing passengers, remained in storage. Paul Morris, who worked as a conductor on that final journey, later recalled, "It was like a funeral. Several passengers were crying. These were people who had been riding the Century for decades." One gentleman told me he had taken his first trip on the Century in 1928 with his father, and now he was seeing it die. He kept a menu from that last dinner service, a pale imitation of what the train had once offered. By 1980, luxury train travel, as it had existed in its golden age, was essentially extinct. Amtrak in the United States and nationalized railways in Europe provided utilitarian service focused on efficiency rather than elegance. The era of white-gloved porters, multi-course meals on fine china, and burnished wood interiors seemed to belong to a distant past. Yet the human desire for romance, nostalgia, and exceptional experiences never disappeared. In the 1980s, a new phenomenon emerged: the luxury tourist train that existed not primarily as transportation, but as an experience in itself. The pioneer in this field was the Venice-Simplon Orient Express, launched in 1982 by the American-born businessman James B. Sherwood. Sherwood spent $16 million acquiring and restoring original 1920s and 1930s carriages from the original Orient Express. These carriages, with their marquetry panels, Art Deco fixtures, and plush upholstery, had been scattered across Europe, some serving as restaurants, others abandoned in railway sidings. The restored train began operating between London and Venice, deliberately evoking the golden age of rail travel. Passengers were required to dress formally for dinner. The staff wore period uniforms. The experience was marketed not as transportation, but as time travel, a chance to step back into a more elegant era. The Venice-Simplon Orient Express was an immediate commercial success, attracting wealthy passengers willing to pay premium prices for what was essentially a moving heritage experience. A one-way journey from London to Venice in 1982 cost approximately £1,400, about $2,500 in 1982 dollars, or $7,500 in today's money. The success of the Venice-Simplon Orient Express inspired similar ventures around the world. The Royal Scotsman, now Belmond Royal Scotsman, launched in 1985, offering luxury tour of the Scottish Highlands. The Eastern and Oriental Express began service in Southeast Asia in 1993, connecting Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand. In South Africa, Rovo's Rail started operations in 1989, marketing itself as the most luxurious train in the world. These new luxury trains shared certain characteristics that distinguished them from their historical predecessors. First, they operated primarily as tourist attractions rather than as practical transportation. Their routes were often circular or included lengthy stops at points of interest. Second, they were priced at a level that placed them in the category of ultra-luxury experiences. A week-long journey on Rovo's Rail's Pride of Africa could cost upward of $15,000 per person in the early 2000s. Third, they self-consciously referenced the golden age of rail travel, often incorporating restored vintage equipment and requiring staff to adhere to traditional service protocols. Dining cars featured crystal, silver, and fine china. Lounge cars offered afternoon tea and evening cocktails served by white-gloved stewards. Victoria Jeffries, who worked as a tour director on the Royal Scotsman from 1990 to 2005, observed, "What we were selling wasn't really train travel. It was a fantasy, the fantasy of being an aristocrat in the 1920s, journeying through spectacular landscapes while being pampered. Our guests wanted to dress for dinner, dance to a small orchestra, and pretend that the outside world with its airports and highways didn't exist." This new model of luxury rail proved resilient precisely because it did not compete with faster modes of transportation. No one took the Venice Simplon Orient Express because they needed to get from London to Venice quickly. They chose it because they wanted the journey itself to be an extraordinary experience. By the early 21st century, luxury tourist trains were operating on every continent except Antarctica. The Trans-Siberian Express, once a utilitarian service across Russia's vast expanse, was reimagined as the Golden Eagle Trans-Siberian Express, featuring en-suite bathrooms, a piano bar, and gourmet dining. In India, the Maharajas Express launched in 2010, offering week-long journeys in accommodations inspired by the private rail cars of Indian princes. A presidential suite on this train measured 448 square feet, larger than many New York apartments, and cost approximately $23,000 per week. In Peru, the Belmond Andean Explorer began service in 2017, traversing one of the world's highest rail routes while offering oxygen-enriched cabins to combat altitude sickness. In Australia, the Indian Pacific and the GAN offered multi-day journeys across vast, otherwise inaccessible landscapes. These modern luxury trains succeeded by embracing their anachronistic nature. In a world obsessed with speed and efficiency, they deliberately moved slowly. In an age of casual attire, they required formal dress. In an era of digital connectivity, many offered limited or no internet access, forcing passengers to engage with their surroundings and each other. The demographics of their passengers revealed much about their appeal. A 2015 marketing study conducted for Belmond, formerly Orient Express hotels, found that the typical guest on their luxury trains was between 55 and 75 years old, well-educated and affluent, with a household net worth exceeding $2 million. Interestingly, many had never experienced the original golden age of rail travel. They were pursuing a romanticized version of an era they had only encountered through films, novels, and family stories. Dr. Elizabeth Carter, a cultural historian at Columbia University, explains the phenomenon. These trains offer what we might call performed nostalgia, the opportunity to participate in a carefully curated version of the past without its inconveniences or inequalities. Passengers can experience the glamour of 1920s rail travel without the coal dust, the rigid class hierarchies, or the political tensions of the interwar period. This reimagining of luxury rail has not been without criticism. Some observers note the irony of wealthy tourists playing at being early 20th century elites while passing through regions where modern poverty remains endemic. Others point out that the service model often perpetuates colonial dynamics, particularly in Asia and Africa, where predominantly white, Western guests are served by local staff in period uniforms. Yet the success of these ventures suggests that they fulfill a profound desire for experiences that contrast with the homogenized, accelerated nature of modern travel. As airports around the world increasingly resemble one another, with the same retail outlets and fast food restaurants, luxury trains offer distinctiveness and a sense of place. Meanwhile, a parallel development has emerged in the form of high-speed luxury rail. In countries with advanced rail networks, particularly Japan, China, and parts of Europe, train operators have introduced premium classes that combine speed with exceptional comfort. Japan's Shinkansen Grand Class offers spacious leather seating, gourmet meals, and personal attendants on trains traveling at speeds up to 200 mph. France's TGV offers a first-class experience that includes three-course meals with wine service. These services reconcile luxury with the modern need for efficiency, creating a hybrid model that would have been unrecognizable to the passengers of the original Orient Express. The future of luxury rail appears to be evolving in multiple directions simultaneously. On one track, tourist-oriented heritage trains continue to offer immersive historical experiences at premium prices. On another, high-speed services incorporate elements of luxury into efficient transportation. And on yet another, entirely new concepts are emerging. Japan's cruise train 7 Stars in Kyushu, launched in 2013, represents perhaps the most innovative reimagining of luxury rail. With only 14 suites for a maximum of 30 passengers, this train features floors made from rare wood, handcrafted furniture, and bathroom sinks carved from single pieces of Kyushu marble. The train moves at a deliberately slow pace, stopping frequently for passengers to experience local culture. The price for a 4-day journey exceeds $11,000 per person, and bookings must be made through a lottery system due to overwhelming demand. Similarly, Spain's Al-Andalus offers what might be called a slow luxury experience, meandering through Andalusia with extended stops for wine tastings, flamenco performances, and visits to historical sites. The journey emphasizes cultural immersion rather than efficient transportation. These developments suggest that luxury rail has found new relevance by embracing its differences from other modes of travel. Rather than competing with aviation on speed or with automobiles on flexibility, it offers distinctive experiences that cannot be replicated elsewhere. Yet questions remain about the sustainability of this model. The operation of heritage equipment is increasingly expensive as skilled craftspeople capable of maintaining vintage systems become scarcer. Environmental concerns about carbon emissions have prompted some travelers to reconsider their transportation choices. And the COVID-19 pandemic severely disrupted the business model of tourist trains, forcing extended shutdowns and raising questions about the viability of shared spaces in an era of health concerns. The pandemic's long-term impact on luxury rail remains uncertain. Some industry observers suggest that the desire for more controlled, intimate travel experiences may actually benefit luxury trains in comparison to mass transportation options. Others worry that changed consumer preferences and economic constraints will reduce demand for ultra-premium travel products. What is certain is that luxury rail travel has demonstrated remarkable resilience and adaptability over its century-and-a-half existence. It has reinvented itself multiple times in response to technological, economic, and cultural changes. From George Pullman's practical innovation to James Sherwood's nostalgic reimagining, the concept has continuously evolved while maintaining certain core elements. Exceptional service, distinctive design, and the romance of the rails. The Orient Express that departed Paris on October 4, 1883, with 40 passengers bound for Constantinople, bears little resemblance to the 7 Stars in Kyushu, circling the Japanese island with its 30 pampered guests. Yet they share a fundamental promise, that the journey itself can be as meaningful as the destination. Perhaps this explains why, despite repeated predictions of its demise, luxury rail travel has never completely disappeared. It has contracted, transformed, and reimagined itself, but some version has always survived. In the dining car of the Venice Simplon Orient Express passing through the Alps in 2019, a couple celebrates their anniversary with champagne. The man wears a tuxedo, the woman an evening gown. Outside, the same mountains roll by that passengers witnessed in 1930. Inside, the restored Art Deco panels gleam under soft lighting. The maitre d' recites the evening's menu in French, then English. For these passengers, the golden age of rail travel isn't dead, it's being continuously reborn. Some say the persistence of luxury rail in the face of faster, cheaper alternatives represents simple nostalgia, a refusal to fully embrace modernity. Others argue that it demonstrates the enduring human desire for experiences that engage all the senses and unfold at a natural pace. Perhaps it reflects a recognition that efficiency isn't always the highest value, that sometimes the most meaningful journeys are those that allow us to notice the world passing by outside our window. Or perhaps there's something more mysterious at work, something in the rhythmic clatter of wheels on rails that resonates with the human soul in a way that the hum of jet engines never could. Old railwaymen speak of the call of the rails, a near-mystical attraction that keeps drawing people back to trains long after more practical alternatives have emerged. There's something alive about a great train, reflects Peter Northcross, who has worked as a steward on luxury trains on 4 continents since 1975. After all these years, I still feel it. When we're gliding through the countryside at sunset, with the dining car all laid out with crystal and silver, and I see the faces of our passengers as they take it all in, there's a kind of magic there. Not the flashy magic of technology, but something older, something that connects us to every person who ever took this journey before. So whatever happened to luxury train travel, it died and was reborn. It vanished and returned in new forms. It adapted to changing times while preserving its essential character. Like the mythical phoenix, it has risen repeatedly from the ashes of technological obsolescence and economic crisis. Today, as travelers increasingly seek authentic experiences rather than mere efficiency, the future of luxury rail appears surprisingly bright. New projects are under development in Europe, Asia, and the Americas. Old routes are being reconsidered through the lens of heritage tourism. And in station museums from London to Istanbul, the preserved carriages of legendary trains remind us of an era when the journey itself was the ultimate luxury. The dining car attendant strikes a small brass gong. Dinner is served. The passengers move toward their tables, where crystal glasses catch the light of the setting sun. Outside, the landscape unfolds like a living painting. Inside, time slows to the rhythm of the rails. The train moves forward, carrying with it the echoes of all the journeys that came before.